guys, welcome to Atlas Forge Strategic Metal, week number 2, a series of 3. So welcome to call. This is Andy Morbitzer, CEO, Atlas Forge. We'll get started here in just a moment. I'm going to test the system and be right back with you. Okay, welcome to the call, everyone. Strategic Metals, everything electronic, part 2 of a 3-part series. I just got confirmation that yes, you can hear me and yes, you can see me. However, the chat doesn't seem to be working. So with that said, I'm going to get started. Again, Andy Morbitzer, CEO, Atlas Forge. World of volatility in the paper assets and the stock market. You've seen great volatility around the world with money and currency and trade wars and paper assets. And so in 2008, I learned my lesson. I saw the crash of 2008. And I said to myself, there has to be a better way to invest and hedge and protect what I've already earned than a paper asset, because I had no control there. So that led me to search the world over for great real property assets. So that's how we got involved with strategic metals. Last week, we really learned about population and population explosion, and that there's about 3 billion individuals that are going to come into the middle class and or what I call capitalism. It's going to be their first shot at a bank account, first shot at being an entrepreneur, and they're going to all do it through smartphones and technology. So that's what we learned last week, that population is one of those dimensions, if you will, that will really affect supply and demand. And as you know, strategic metals are already rare, some of them rarer than precious gold and silver metal. So we've got really 3 things that are going to lead us into what I believe the revolution of technology, the great technology revolution, if you will, that'll lead us into the next decade or 2 as one of the best possible places to hedge, insure, and then earn some appreciation on these metals. So as we will get started right here. Strategic metals. This really is going to show you the products and the usage of technology and strategic metals and microchips and anything that has a computer, anything that's a smartphone, will all utilize strategic metals. So how the boom in hybrid cars in the markets, dysprosium oxide. It doesn't seem long ago everybody was laughing at, the Priuses of the world, the little tin cans. They had problems with charging. They could only go 100 miles, and that was the first shot. That was the Model T. And now here, 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, you've got huge corporations that I'll show you here in just a second. But most people thought the hybrid electric vehicle would just be, like it said, a sardine can. It really didn't solve or have any utility. It was too expensive for most people. So now that the prices have come down and the demand, because of green energy and carbon emissions and footprints and all these types of things, solve a huge problem, and that's pollution. That's carbon dioxide. That's, if you will, if you're one of the believe that global warming is being affected by carbon emissions and gasoline and exhaust, then this is the solution. Electric cars, they're cheaper, faster, more economic. They solve a huge problem in the industry. So we're looking and talking right now about dysprosium oxide, and you really have a chance to profit from this exploding market. Like I said before, that right now when I look at things and I look at risk versus reward, I can't think of a better product to take advantage of the movement around the world of electronic vehicles and drones and solar panels and smartphones and smart computers, because I could go to the stock market and buy some stock in Samsung or Apple or Tesla or Ford or what have you. But when I look at the stock market, it's at one of the most expensive times in history to have an investment in the stock market and paper asset and in buying stock in a company. So when I look at that, I look at, okay, it's the most expensive, and we know that. And one of our teachings in the coming weeks will be about everything cyclical. In investing and macroeconomics, everything is cyclical. It comes and it goes. It has the build up, the rise that hits the apex and then comes down the other side, all based on supply and demand. So if one of my options is the most expensive in the world in a stock, and my other option is I can buy the supporting and invest in the supporting materials and components that make up what I believe to be the future and a huge demand worldwide. I'm talking hundreds of billions of microchips, and I'll show you here in a second. So when I weigh the difference between the two, where do I feel more comfortable? Where do I have more control? Where can I liquidate? Where am I not subject to a crash on the stock market? Because I'm a firm believer that the stock market is way, way overvalued, worse than it was in 2008. And we saw what happened there. Most people lost half their net worth. So to eliminate that risk, the next plausible option is buy the underlying asset. Remember, during the gold rush, the miners who mined the gold weren't the people that turned out being the millionaires. It was the guy at the general store that sold the oil and the gas and the wheelbarrows and the picks and the axe and the shovel. We're a general store. Our general store consists of gold, silver, strategic metals, soon to be diamonds and whiskeys. We're the general store. And I hope you guys understand that. Strategic metals, and you look at just the global annual sales. Now, this is just the last 6 or 7 years. And you can see plug-in vehicles have almost doubled every year. And this is nothing. You look at annual sales, like plug-in electric vehicles, they're only at about 1.2 million products. So when we look at this, we're looking at, and every one of these companies, Europe, Japan, they all have mandated electric vehicles. It's not a fad anymore. In the chat here, it looks like I'm reestablished according to GoToWebinar. Hybrid cars are becoming part of the landscape, and the smart investor, if you want to get on the inside track of really how to become wealthy, you look back throughout history and how all the millionaires and billionaires were made over the last 100 years. They did it in metals, whether that was steel, aluminum, oil, coal. They are the essence of everything. And when you have a population explosion, you have a product explosion, well, of course, you have a recipe of success. Exactly. When you look at things from an investor perspective, you really want to invest in trends. And I know no bigger trend than smartphones right now. Drones, solar panels, solar energy, and all of this stuff, dichrosium oxide, doesn't get much better than this. We look at what makes it valuable through or dichrosium. It's got magnetic strength, and you're saying, well, what does that mean? Well, it's the backbone of hybrid electric cars. And this market, as shown in this picture here, it's not going to slow down. If anything, it will grow exponentially much faster, as you will see on some of these slides. UK and France are targeting towards 100% electronic sales. Now, okay, this image depicts 2014, but understand, like anything, there's phase 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Take Bitcoin, for example. Bitcoin came out, solved a problem, but it had a lot of problems. Its functionality, its scalability, its utility. Same thing with electric cars. That's been out now for a couple of years, and they're starting to refine it, make it better, more cost effective. There was an old commercial by BASF, BASF, that says, we don't make the products, we make the products better. And what they mean by that, they make them stronger, faster, more resistant, maybe have more utility. Same thing with strategic metals. Without strategic metals, we wouldn't have smartphones. You wouldn't have touch screens. You wouldn't have kiosks. So when I look at strategic metals, it's just an improvement upon what the products already are. But when we look at mandates, the demand for low carbon economy is central policies for study of 32 of the most significant natural resources. The EU listed 8 as critically at risk for supply shortages. Dysprosium oxide is most at risk. So you have a supply issue. There's not enough to go around now. And now you're going to take 1,000-fold the demand. The price will follow. Was France, the UK, here, China and India. Between these two countries, there's almost 3 billion people. In China, adopted hybrid electric cars is 17,600 privately owned electronic vehicles, but it has over a billion people, actually 1.3 billion. It's the largest economy. And I am a firm believer in investing in dominant GDPs, emerging markets. You've got to follow the money, you follow the populations. Understand that China and India are just now going through what we just experienced the last 50 years here in the United States. The pig through the python, the baby boomers that affected every market, from home sales to household goods to the stock market to pensions to money to the stock market. Whenever you have a population explosion, all these people want the niceties and the conveniences of 21st century living. That could be smartphones, computers, electric cars. So now twice as many people are going to be using these conveniences and these products. So as we move forward, China and India, they have ambitious electric vehicle targets. You look at China with 7 million electric cars by 2025, and it looks like 10 million by 2030. So we have a decade. We're there before the boom. We're at the baseline, if you will, for major disruption in transportation, in communications. And these are, understand when I talk about cars, it's not only the batteries and/or it's the microchips, the computers in the cars, the computers in the smartphones. You look at smartphones, and for every iPhone, for example, there's 5 microchips. Without strategic metals, without the galliums, the germaniums, the dysprosium oxide, the rheniums of the world, you wouldn't have these products. And to make it even better, step one. Step one has been introduced to financially incentivize people who buy electric cars. China's come out and said they're going to give you an incentive to buy an electric car. And I find that ironic. We all know that China is environmentally one of the most challenging countries in the world. They also make about 85% of the strategic metals. So as we get into more cleaner, more efficient ways to mine strategic metals, because remember, they're all byproducts of other mining operations. So they're very difficult, they're very expensive to mine. So now we're going to go with green. We're going to, and China's committed to trying to clean up the environment. You know, we had some neighbors that moved in right beside us from up in our house of Canada, and they were Chinese. And we got to talking, and we asked, well, why did you move? Why did you want to come here for your kids? And they said, the air is so polluted that in India alone, 1.2 million people die a day just from the air quality. So when we look at the 2 biggest populous countries in the world that are committed to cleaning up the environment, it's really coming out with electrical cars by reducing carbon and getting rid of the combustion and the gas in the 2 largest markets in the world, or populous markets in the world. That's a huge demand. Of course, the United States and China lead the way with purchasing of electrical vehicles, number one and 2 markets. But as far as population and commitments by governments to move forward with electronic vehicles by giving incentives. So you know that incentives, we're moving towards electronic cars and autonomous cars and driving. So every one of these cars is going to need the basics and power, electrical vehicles and their power. So we look at something that makes just a lot of sense. It's a new BMW i8 Gran Coupe. I mean, it's modern, it's sleek, it's beautiful, it's effective, it's efficient. It doesn't look like a Prius at all. So I would buy this. Okay, so we've got BMW, we've got countries like China, Europe, the United States that are all on board of new technology. So this is a disruption in and of itself. Think of the $1 trillion industry of mobile phones. Look at the $1 trillion industry of drones and solar power. Look at the $1 trillion industry of money and cryptocurrency. Look at the $1 trillion industry of the automobile, luxury brands like Porsche, the new Cayenne Coupe that came out, Ferrari. I mean, I saw one yesterday. Bugatti made an electrical vehicle that was like 1,000 megawatts, which equates to And don't quote me on the megawatt. I don't think it's megawatt, kilowatts, or whatever it is, but it would be 1,250 horsepower. Like it go from 0 to 6 in like 2 seconds. I mean, it's fantastic. So as these become trending, which they are now, it's a great time to invest in the future, whether it be dysprosium, whether it be gallium, germanium, or any of the strategic metals that we have. We talked about last week about the aero industry and the refitting and the building of thousands upon thousands of new airplanes that are smaller, more efficient, all use strategic metals specifically. Remember, most of these strategic metals, they are consumables. They're not renewable. They're just now looking at ways that are cost effective to recycle and renew the usage of some of these strategic metals. But for now, it's more expensive to renew them or recycle them than it is to mine them. So when you look at price points and the values of these, as green takes over the world for a cleaner world, China, it'll be more expensive to mine these metals from a standpoint of green. All humanity, really. I mean, we got to take care of Mother Earth. A poor job of that. So China and the U.S. account for more than half the electric cars in the world. Just so happens those are the two largest GDPs, followed by Japan and Germany. So we've covered Japan, China, Germany, and the United States, biggest markets in the world. So we've got great demand, but we've got very limited supply, and this is going to take a couple of years for this to roll out. So timing is perfect. We're well beyond the curve. I mean, well beyond the curve in both cars and mobile phones. So let's look at the growing demand and critical supply of dysprosium oxide. It's something that you want in your portfolio. Rhenium, dysprosium, every one of our metals. I think the call to Friday will be with Bodo Albrecht, and we're going to specifically go through each of the strategic metals, show its utility, show its application, and talk about supply and demand of each and every metal that we have. And that will, I think, finish up, other than the third series of this call, will end the Strategic Metals Month. So you can see that as you understand the supply and demand of these, and here we go, Elon Musk, India commits to sell only electric cars by 2030. That's only 10 years away, guys. And Elon Musk also, it's not on this slide show, but he just announced last week that he bought a huge parcel of land in Shanghai in China, and it will be the world's largest electronic vehicle manufacturer production facility in the world. So now you've got China, the largest GDP in the world, that will consume and buy the most electronic cars that supply 85% of the strategic metals, and you have a big name brand like Elon Musk. Forget about whether he's doing good or bad, or Tesla this or that. It's not about that. It's about the awareness and the trend that everybody's moving towards electronic vehicles. Whether it's Ford, BMW, Bentley, it doesn't matter. Okay, so here we talk about 1.3 billion residents. Air contributes to 2 million deaths per year. So this solves a huge problem. Global warming, deaths, I'm sure it's related to all kinds of cancers and health issues. So electric vehicles and electric propulsion and locomotion is the future. So as we look at, let's see here, BMW, Volvo, Volkswagen, Mercedes, Jaguar, all of these huge companies, BMW said that 12 electronic cars, 13 hybrids would be on the market by 2025, another 5 years away. So do you see the urgency, or why we're recommending? And I'm sitting here saying this is a great place to have some money working for you, to start earning and having your money earn money for you. That's the key to everything. If you're paying interest, you'll never get out of that cycle. But if you're earning compound interest, then it becomes easier and easier when your money starts making you money. Remember, everything we do focused on one thing: money. How to save what you have, how to invest in a safe environment, how to speculate. The world's evolving, it's changing quickly. This is a category creator. Nobody else in the world is doing this. You have first dibs at it, first offer. So take advantage, because you have a lull here for the next, I'm going to guess, about 2 years that everything, quote unquote, stays stable before you start seeing the paper asset world deteriorate. And this really achieves a lot of things for you. This strategic metals are so vitally important to me as a entrepreneur and an investor because gold and silver, as great as they are as insurables and hedges and protection, and I still believe in them, don't get me wrong, and I still think everybody should have some. But typically, like take last week when the stock market dropped 1,000 points, where did the money go? Who was the recipient of that revenue flow, that meltdown, that cash out of the stock market? Well, it's directly correlated to where did it go? Gold. Gold jumped by 3.5%. Stock market dropped by about 2.5, 3% in one day. And in a 2 day, it dropped about 1,000 points, which is probably, I think it was the third highest drop in history in the stock market. So to eliminate that volatility, to eliminate that risk and encumbrance on your money and not being able to get it out or adapt or react to market conditions, Strategic Metals offers you a place to hedge, save, diversify, because we vault them in Germany. You can't take physical possession of these. I guess you could, but you wouldn't want to. They're in big barrels, and they need to be in temperature controlled areas, and they need to be recycled. They don't have a shelf life of 50 years. So all the strategic metals that we buy them and we use them and we replace your investment with the new batch that comes in. So you'll always have fresh 999.9 on most of the materials that constantly recycle, old to new, old to new, old to new. That keeps the value up, that keeps the market moving. That's a good, healthy ecosystem for an investor. And when I talk about our supplier, they have contracts with all these companies that are constantly buying. So some people say to me, Andy, well, where do I sell it? How do I sell it back? You can sell it right back to Atlas Forge. I believe in it so much, we buy all strategic metals back. If something would happen that you would need to liquidate and cash out, I totally understand. But understand, guys, these are not get rich schemes where it's going to, hit a bubble and an apex and be up 50,000% in a year. These are good, strong, long-term, 3, 5, 7, 10, 20-year assets that are valuable because the stock market doesn't have to crash for them to improve or increase or appreciate in price. So it has all the qualities of gold and silver, but yet it's got a more appealing side that it's used. It's consumable. It's the salt and pepper of the future. The electronic revolution is upon us, and you haven't seen anything yet. If you're not excited about this investment, then I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing better on the planet that I can think of right now. Every major company, Fortune 500, has their hands in the future. So Land Rover, BMW, Volvo, Mercedes, all the big boys all know that everything will be electronic. So when you have that, one of the very best stores of value, potential to appreciate. Total number of electric cars on the road reached 2 million in 2016. That's the latest data I saw. I haven't found really on 2017, but I know that they're more than 2 million now. I think we've hit about 5 million. So slowly but surely, just like anything, it takes testing, it takes time, it takes improvement, it takes infrastructure. I mean, you need. Nicole and I went to the mall the other day, which I absolutely hate, but I went and we stopped because we said, well, wait a second, what's different here? And it was at night. We saw all these silver objects and they had all these lights, and we were like, what is that? Well, it was a brand new Tesla charging station that was put in the mall parking lot of all places. There was probably, I don't know, 10 or 20 of them. Even the charging stations use strategic metals. That's how in demand these metals are going to be. BMW said all equipment and factories to handle combustion engines, hybrid cars, electric cars by 2020. So that's like a year and a half, 2 years from now. So it'll be indicative of the price. It's basic supply and demand. So you see every major manufacturer, E-Type, Zero, hybrid cars. We've talked about microchips in cars and really futuristic cities. And I firmly believe that the one thing that will be the greatest technological advance, even more so than cryptocurrency, will be something called 5G. Now, we've all heard of, throughout the last, I don't know, what has it been, decade or two, I remember having one of the very first phones. It was a big clunky thing that was I had a little Mazda RX-7, and I had a little, cool little phone. I was a little hot shot with my stupid little phone. It was, like a brick and weighed 20 pounds, but I had it because I was cool. But, I really wasn't. But the future, understand what I'm about to tell you right now, will change your life and everyone's life on the planet in such a way the world has never seen before, and it's called 5G. And as you can see in this slide right here, 1G, the basic telephone when I was talking about 1981, I think I got the Mazda in 1987. And then we went to 2G, and then we went to 3, and then we went to 4. And that's kind of where we are right now, 4G. About 1.5 billion people on the planet now have 4G. And 1G was very basic. It was just connecting one person to another. It had no speed. It was like dial-up for the internet. It was slow. And then it got the red one. 2G was really, I think it was 64 kilobytes. And it was very slow, and the calls broke down, and it was like using Skype on a bad day. I mean, it wasn't very good. And then a real big, huge improvement on speed and voice quality was 3G. And you really saw that, right in the dot-com boom, right in the early 90s, mid 90s, we came out with 3G, which was like 3 times faster than 2G. It got up to like 200, 250 kilobytes. And now we fast forward into 3G was another improvement, but it was a huge improvement. It was, 10 times faster and better. And then you got to 4G, which has got into video streaming and gigabytes, and I think it would do 1 gigabyte up till about 5 years ago. And now we're moving into 5G. And let me tell you what 5G really means. 5G means that every phone on the planet will be replaced. Your iPhone that you have now, your Samsung, or multitude of other mobile phone companies around the world, billions of these devices will convert to 5G over the next 10 years. 5G allows us, see, there's always been a problem with mobile phones and its bandwidth and trying to shove too much data into a protocol, if you will. Now 5G is 1,000 times faster. So take 1,000 gigabytes per second for streaming and video and computers talking, smart cities talking, cars talking, autonomous driving. It all happens to happen like real time. And that's what 5G does. And let me quantify it for you. 5G, you could download a 2.5-hour movie in 5 seconds anywhere on the planet, and it'll get better with 5G. At some point, 5G, you saw first 5G really with Watson the computer on Jeopardy. They're introducing the ability of highly, highly sophisticated movement because data is the asset, and all the telephone companies know it. So these communication companies, 5G is that life-changing event that will connect every semiconductor, meaning phone, computer, car, building, home, traffic light, autonomous driving. The world that you will see 10 years from now will be completely different than what it was. It's going to allow people to have autonomous driving and be able to stop on a dime, download a movie, send a file, stream. It's incredible. It'll be the biggest advancement because you've got to profit on trends. In 5G, just the infrastructure, the 5G towers. Now, you see the big towers when you drive down the highways and you see those big metal structures, and you see one like every 10 miles, every 20 miles. And that's the infrastructure that we now know is really 1G to 4G. But with 5G, where it's different is you're going to have more 5G towers, and you start to see them in these test cities, like down in Austin, Texas. I saw one in Europe where you have these 5G towers that allow you to, where your connectivity and your 5G is instantaneous. No more downloading or waiting on downloading. You can communicate real time. And to be able to perform just the infrastructure of the 5G towers needed that you're going to see on every street corner, it'll run cities and lighting and logistics and stop signs and red lights and deliveries and drones and logistics and delivery for Amazon and Walmart and all these different types of things will all run on 5G. Now, to put that into perspective, what does that mean? That means that dysprosium oxide, gallium, germanium, anything that's critical to the function or the building of microchips, the demand for microchips will be hundreds upon hundreds of billions with a B just to meet the need that we have right now. Not the new 3 billion people that are coming, just to satisfy the technological revolution, the addiction to these smartphones. If you're an investor, I remember back in the day, one of the very first wisest guys I ever met, he said, Andy, if you want to invest, learn one thing and one thing only. Invest in things that people are addicted to. And you look throughout history, whether it's a paper stock or whatever it was, you look at the performances, good times, bad times, Pepsi, Coke, Johnson & Johnson. People get addicted to soaps and skincare and lotions and sugar. Sugar's a huge addiction, great for an investor, terrible for your body and your health, but great for an investor. Same thing applies here. This is addictive. Try to go walk through a mall, walk through any city, town. There's not 1 day, 1 hour, or 5 minutes that you won't come across somebody on their phone. It's addictive between social medias and all the things going on. The connectivity of the world is at our disposal, and they're all going to demand what we have. So it's a beautiful, beautiful scenario. Now we've talked about cars, we've talked about drones, we've talked about smartphones and computers and, kiosks at McDonald's, all these touch screens, computers. You couldn't have a smartphone or a touch screen computer or any kiosks at McDonald's or wherever you go. You couldn't have this without indium, because without indium, you couldn't have a touch screen. Do you see what I'm saying here? That boom, the Industrial Revolution, the baby boom, population explosion. Everybody's going to want these. So let's now talk about energy, green energy, non-combustible, electric cars, solar panels. Here we go. Solar panels, I won't even get into it. Strategic metal, you wouldn't have solar panels without strategic metals, period. And we'll get in next with Bodo exactly which metals go with which industry. And like I said before, we're going to offer baskets where we're going to combine 2 or 3 strategic metals to be specifically for maybe the aero industry, maybe electronic industry, maybe the smartphone industry. So you'll be able to pick and choose what excites you, what you want to invest in after you research and make your decision of where and how you want to do this, or a basket to diversify within strategic metals themselves. Own 1, 2, or 3. It's always advisable. It's always prudent to diversify. I don't care if it's money or currency or stocks, bonds, derivative. It doesn't matter. And in the investment world, you always want to diversify. So I think it's prudent that you have a couple of these different types of strategic metals. So the next thing up, solar panels. It's starting in California, and it seems like all major trends start in California and head east. And they sweep through the United States and China, and then they go out to the rest of the world. Think of a world where every flat surface is a solar panel, whether it be a car, a top of an apartment or a flat or a home. Everything in the future, in the very near future, will be solar powered. We've got to get serious about the environment. We got to get serious about pollution, or we're going to kill this earth before our kids even grow up. And it's something needs to be done now. Now I won't even go down that road, but we need to concentrate. People need to step up, be leaders, and take care of Mother Earth, because it's definitely in trouble. So solar panels, There's been solar installations in California the first 6 months of 2017. So you're starting to see that they've brought solar power and green energy down to a price that is affordable. So is any new home that is bought, California became the first U.S. state to require solar panels. So think about that. As construction happens all around the world, as people move into middle class and have the means, what do? They buy homes. They buy electrical vehicles. They're already going to have their smartphones. I mean, people would rather have their smartphone than eat, I think. That's how addictive it is. But hey, we can all profit from it. But this is the first step of what the future is going to look like, guys. You could not have solar panels and solar energy without strategic metals. So the other 49 states will be watching to see what happens. Some guy by the name of Robert Raymer, Tech Director, California Building Institution. So happening now. What's happening now? Think about how big California is. If you look at GDPs, California, even though it's within the United States, just the state of California, GDP in the world, or actually it's the 8th largest GDP. It's bigger than most countries. 1,000 single-family homes and 50,000 multi-family buildings will be built across the strait in 2020. Less than 20% of homes built in the state now include the panels. You can see, again, more demand for strategic metals. You see where we're going with this? Solar panels. It's all about energy. It's all about storing energy at the peak of its production, meaning when the sun is the highest in the sky. And then we're going to take that, each individual home, and we're going to take that energy and we're going to invert that. We're going to save some of it and we're going to use some of it. So we're going to really wean ourselves off of the electrical grid, because the electrical grid is really run by coal and very, very dirty. So battery storage technology and cheaper electricity, when you can capture it during the middle of the day and keep that power on site for use in early evening hours when electrical rates go up, it saves everybody money. It saves the environment and the planet. So you can bet that solar panels and solar energy is just beginning. Okay, that was the end of presentation number 2. And hopefully you're starting to form an opinion and why we're so excited about strategic metals, what it has to offer in the future. You know, investing is about sound, prudent, objective thinking. You've got to really assess the risk versus the reward. And having dealt with, you know, many decades in the financial arena, right now with politics going on, currency wars, trade wars, high debt, bubbled real estate, bubbled stock market, I think in my heart that real property assets are going to be the true winner for the next decade or two. And I think you're going to start seeing that. You're already seeing capital flight, just like happened last week. You know, $100 billion got moved out of the stock market or whatever it is and went right into gold. So you're starting to see the capital flight of investments and the thought of people that maybe the stock market isn't the safest vehicle for me and my family. And I'm not saying, hey, go take all your money out of the stock market. I'm not saying that at all. I truly, even right now, I believe that the stock market has a lot of energy left in it. And there's a lot of profits to be made. But don't be the guy that's the one that's greedy. Like all the people that happened in cryptocurrency that didn't sell any when it hit 18,000. Because they invest and they trade on emotion. And it's euphoric when it's going up. It's hard to take a step back and take some profit off the top. And I urge everybody that has paper assets, you know, get with your professional licensed stockbroker if you have one, or if you do it yourself. You need to take some money, some profit off the top. Because if that's your only investment, if that's your only protection and vehicle, then you're highly exposed. And unfortunately, I'm a believer, and I'm not doom and gloom the end of the day that, the world's all going to come crashing down, because it's not. People still have to eat. People are still going to go to work. It'll just be different. Your money will be worth less. Your savings are going to get decimated. Just like 2008, $11.3 trillion vanished from the stock market. So I implore you, if you are a linear thinker, if you only have one bank account or one currency or one 401k or one investment in a mid cap, large cap, small cap fund of the same family of products, you're not diversified. See, what happens is real property assets, gold, silver, strategic metals, diamonds, whiskeys, they're shock absorbers. Number one. So when the fiat world and the paper world crash, which they will, they're under so much pressure and debt, they can't sustain this forever. Do I still think there's room to grow? Absolutely. Matter of fact, median income, actually, for the first time in 22 years, the household median income actually went up after adjusted for inflation by $1,200. So all the media hype that everything's so terrible and everybody's unemployed and the world's going to end is all. It's the debt you need to worry about. So think about where you want to be, because moving forward, you've got to have a plan B. That's why we built what we built. You can get into the highest quality products, have some good sound investments. It diversifies you. So that's why we recommend strategic metals. Maybe we'll have a call on allocation baskets. And that's why we believe in strategic metals. So next week we have the part 3 of 3 series of strategic metals. So we're going to go ahead and we'll have that. And it's completely different. You'll love it too. So we've really showed the population, the demand. Now we have the products and the usage. So next week we'll tie it all together, that we're going to specifically go through the applications of each metal. And thank you, Stu. And Stu just came in and said the Dow's down about 500 more points. So you're starting to see volatility. And why do you see volatility in the stock market? Faith and trust. Understand that each hedge fund or ETF or manager of these multi-million and billion dollars account, they all have thresholds of, they get nervous. And Wall Street knows more than anybody that these markets are manipulated. They're built with free money. The central banks around the world print money, give them to their banking buddies and their Wall Street buddies. And it's not just the United States. It's the world is in debt, highly in debt. The only reason the stock market is reaching all-time highs over the last month or two, whether it's the Shanghai, whatever exchange or Dow Jones or S&P or NASDAQ, it's all fueled by free money. And why would they take such amount of money and apply it to the stock market versus applying it to new roads or infrastructure or social programs? Because they know they use this as a vehicle and a tool to keep the status quo, the masses at ease, that everything's all right. It's the euphoric effect that the stock market's going great, so everything must be okay. It's a total lie. It's money being pumped in to support the theory that everything's okay. And it was money that was printed. It wasn't earned and invested. It was printed out of free. The bubble of the stock market that should concern you. It's the debt of the world, almost $300 trillion. It's not just the United States. It's a worldwide problem. And either you do be proactive and do things to mitigate against those true fears, or you're going to get caught up in it. And unfortunately, you're not going to like what's on the other side of the hill. We've seen it. We've seen it throughout history. So be proactive. Take a prudent step or two in your life and do something that ensures your standard of living. You'll be glad that you did. And oh, by the way, there's a damn good chance you're going to make some money. Not only protect and hedge, but you're going to make some great returns. That's what it's all about. So with that said, this is Andy Morbitzer, CEO Atlas Forge. Guys, have a great week. Invest wisely. Check out Atlas Forge. Get yourself protected, hedged, insured, and diversified. With that said, have a great night, guys.